This is it. The end of the world. 300,000 years of humanity finally snuffed out. You can't say we didn't give it our best shot. We really put in another gear the last century. A couple of globe-spanning conflicts, each bigger than the last. Every natural resource dug up, a great divide drawn across the continents, and untold amounts of greenhouse gas released into the ether. Sooner or later, something was gonna give. And knowing humanity, well, it sure as hell wasn't gonna be us. It's not like we didn't see it coming either. The post-apocalypse has been a thing in fiction for probably thousands of years. For as long as people have been able to imagine an end to the world, they've also pictured how life would continue on after it. The rapture, Armageddon, or that Third World War, it doesn't matter. Humanity has always loved to label cataclysmic events as world-ending, but simultaneously treat them as nothing but speed bumps. It's always been in human nature to survive, to persevere, even if everything around it doesn't. Of course, now even that's at its end. But that begs the question, did we leave enough behind? The mountains of trash will, at some point, forever fade into the background. Our precious forever chemicals are only forever until nature finds a way to evolve around them. There's a shot, even if it's maybe unlikely, that they will all be forgotten as the sun finally flickers out. But will we? Are there those who will remember us? 1986, April 26th, 1:23 a.m. and 4 seconds. In northern Ukraine, a test begins. A simulation to safeguard one of the wonders of the modern world, quietly humming along in the background, lighting up entire cities with its power seeming never-ending, invisibly wrestled out of the atom. At the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, this was routine. For 56 further seconds, that's all it was. A test among hundreds, all to make sure it was working as intended. But then it wasn't. The 1,000-ton lid atop the core, allowing the miraculous reaction to happen as if forged from bedrock, is cast into the air, allowing oxygen to fill the void of the now poisoned reactor, and chaos. For the people closest, it was the entire world blinking out for a moment. Routine to unseen in a split atom. Alarms blaring, fire trucks racing to the scene, wide-eyed officials screaming, evacuation starting. But then, silence. A cold, blue glow cast over the landscape from the once magical building. Firefighters desperately trying to contain the raging inferno, rushing dutifully into the burning husk, but no one could possibly have any idea of what they just released. Before this whole ordeal, well, Chernobyl was probably the biggest Armageddon moment Europe had seen. The world had witnessed the power of the atom when dropped in anger almost 40 years earlier, something that reshaped the lines of our world, but that even our peaceful wrangling of nature's cause could result in the apocalypse, well, that was a whole nother can of worms. The Chernobyl exclusion zone, 30 kilometers radii in all directions, placing the power plant in the middle. That's what was first decided. No one was to stay, enter, or wander through. A complete wasteland, closed off from humanity for possibly 20,000 years. A complete playground, not only for nature's cause to take what we unleashed and reclaim what was once its, but for the imagination. For years, this invisible force of radioactivity has remained horrifying, theorized as having the possibility to change anything or everything, boiling you from the inside, growing you an extra pair of arms, or giving the wildlife that faint
green glow, Spider-Man, the Hulk, Fallout, the list goes on forever. And so, as the news of the wide-open reactor bathing the land of the USSR in its rays started spreading around the world, so also did the stories. Rumors of deep-rooted CIA involvement prior to the accident, a cover-up for something far worse, mutants roaming the highly irradiated red forest and the ghost town of Pripyat, being home to a menagerie of radioactive entities. The world had panicked, and nearly 15 years on, its imagination still ran wild. In the country where the world's now most enticing place had been violently carved into the dirt, at the plunge into the new millennium, talks emerged of a new story, set in a new medium inspired by classics that had come before it. S.T.A.L.K.E.R. Shadow of Chernobyl was an incredibly ambitious project set right in the middle of that cordoned-off piece of land, an adventure into the accident's history, its aftermath, and its conspiracies.
I remember it felt like every year I was reading that S.T.A.L.K.E.R. was months from release, only for it to completely blow past that deadline and miss it yet again. Articles from IGN even labeled it vaporware, and so did numerous online forums. And there wasn't a particularly strong belief that it would ever come out, but the anticipation was enough. I was enthralled with stories of the zone and the possibility of somehow be able to explore some version of it on my own terms. Well,
an almost completely open world for you to explore however you wanted. The uncertainty of years and years of development hell were, when it finally released in 2007, immediately overshadowed. Parts of it were janky, stiff, and buggy, reminding us of those years, but once you found your footing, there was no way back. Within the PC community, it was an almost instant classic, spawning mod pack after mod pack, keeping the title relevant all the way into the 2020s.
History is funny like that. It doesn't necessarily repeat itself, but it does rhyme. Read any article or story about the development of that first S.T.A.L.K.E.R. game and it's pretty clear it was a mess. But it's also clear that the developers cared so deeply about their creation, both on a technical and aesthetic level. And the fans were there. So it'd be a no-brainer to greenlight a sequel, right? And they would have learned so much the first time around with everything that went wrong that the second development cycle would be so much smoother, right? Wow. Chernobyl vacation, gamma radiation, lost in translation, tingling sensation.
In 2010, S.T.A.L.K.E.R. 2 was first announced, a true numbered sequel, and in 2012, it was cancelled. Its studio effectively shut down and the IP bounced around in flux for years, until 2018, when it was resuscitated, development starting over, and finally in 2021 came the first trailer with a release date of the following year of 2022, when the country was invaded. To state that S.T.A.L.K.E.R. 2's development was a little unpredictable, well, that might be understatement of the century, and so to push the game to September 5th, 2024 was to be the final delay. Finally, the world would see what the zone was like all these years later. Which didn't happen. The game was delayed again, but on November 20th, 2024, S.T.A.L.K.E.R. 2 Heart of Chernobyl was finally released. So this is it, huh? The end of the world. Just like the first time I booted up Shadow of Chernobyl after years of anticipation, this excursion into the exclusion zone that I was so enamored with 17 years later felt, if possible, even more unbelievable. Counted in console generations, the years of dev time resulted in the series being absent from the 8th one, spearheaded by the PS4, and while the impressive lighting certainly keep the originals looking sharp even today, the sheer leap in visual fidelity cannot be overstated. From the moment new protagonist Skiff hastily clambers over that perimeter wall, it hits you. This is the zone like you've never seen it before. Taking the events in the first game and propelling them a decade into the future, it's a zone that has changed considerably. Almost dilapidated, crumbling buildings are now overgrown, and nature's cause is not stopping for anyone. It's unforgiving, just like the original. It's hectic, tense, panic-inducing, and at times bone-chillingly terrifying. The moments where you peek around a corner, only to stand barrel to barrel with a squad of bandits, bullets immediately flying, sending chips of crumbling brick across the room as you retreat. Quick, new magazine, peek again, bam, bam, click. It's not for the faint of heart. It's a game that understands, and even more so obsesses over the details both on the macro and micro levels, and maybe that's the highest praise you could possibly give it. For the people to whom it matters the most, after years and years of waiting, it's a stalker game. But those years, those struggles, and those rough seas the studio went through aren't completely wiped away. Just like the ticks of that Geiger counter constantly reminding you of what set this whole thing in motion, there are, scattered all over the game, traces of a troubled development cycle. Read almost any review or analysis of the game at release and you'll see the common denominators. Stutters, inconsistent performance, crashes, memory leaks, a plethora of technical issues that on one hand remind us what we got in 2007, but on the other also impact the experience for a large amount of the player base. But all of these things will be fixed. Just like Hello Games' redemption tour for No Man's Sky or CDPR's journey to patch up Cyberpunk 2077, I believe we'll see all of these things get ironed out. The 100GB patches pushed just days after the initial release can speak for themselves, and even if these things are hard to look past, it's impossible to not glimpse what's behind them. Because there's a whole zone out there that doesn't need fixing.
Someone used to live here. This was someone's home, where they slept, where they woke up, laughed, cried, lived, where they longed to be when life wasn't going their way. A tiny little fracture in the cold, unforgiven world where someone decided to take a stand against everything that wanted them to return to the earth and dare to exist. Of course, there comes a time when even that is up. The seconds ticking by bowed to no one, and there came a day when they walked into this room for the last time, vowing to return, took one last look, and left. On April 27th at 11 a.m., the announcement sounded. Everyone in Pripyat, Ukraine was to do exactly that. Set down whatever they were doing, take one last look, and evacuate, leaving thousands of homes just like this empty, perfectly preserving one last moment of a life lived. 220,000 people. According to the UN, that was the number of people relocated over the years after the initial 150,000. Entire lives uprooted, many of them in but a moment, as the invisible enemy slowly spread over the serene forests and hills of Eastern Europe, still looking exactly like they'd always done. But as we slowly learned exactly what it was that we were dealing with, even these changed. More than 500,000 people. Some volunteered, some convinced, plenty ordered to descend on the area deemed too dangerous to stay in and commence the cleanup. The immense operations of liquidators risking their lives leaves a similar echo. The protective sarcophagus over the reactor, hundreds of irradiated trucks in massive graveyards, gear, clothing, food containers, gas masks, footprints and vehicle tracks carving through the landscape, an echo not of a home loved and cherished, but an echo of an order, of a duty, and of a risk taken. An echo of a life lived.
This is the S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2 that doesn't need fixing. I grew up enamored with Chernobyl. The first time I played S.T.A.L.K.E.R 1, I did it with one thing in mind. The horrific nature of radioactivity and our careful wrestling with it seemed straight out of a horror novel, and the monster at the end of all of those pages was right in the middle of the zone. So that's all I cared for. I needed to see that reactor. And so here, when allowed to return a decade later, I only longed for the same thing. The path there in 2007 was split into sections, almost certainly a limitation of the technology available at the time, but it managed to distill the zone into manageable chunks. Some winding roads, a couple stretches of undisturbed wilderness, but mostly focused around the points that seemed to matter. The train depot in Garbage, the underground lab at the Brain Scorcher, or the comparatively bustling metropolis of Rostock. The zone was wild, hostile, and unforgiving, but all things considered, it shepherded you fairly well without wasting any time, all towards that monster at the center of the zone. This time, however, the zone is overgrown, neglected, and transformed. Straight from the point where you take your first steps in the open world, it's wildly different. The carefully pieced together string of highlights are nowhere to be seen. It's not helping you out at all, but it's not antagonistic towards you either. It just doesn't care. Last time, it wanted you to see everything it offered, but here, the personality of the zone is one of apathy. Even in the lesser zone area that you initially set loose in, the first thing you'll get to grips with is the sheer size of the place. And well, you'll be doing your fair share of walking. A lot of walking, often over-encumbered in order to drag back enough gear to a trader to scrounge up every coupon you can. It's a world that embraces the slowness of it all, akin to experiences like Death Stranding or Red Dead Redemption. If you can afford yourself to slow down, embrace the act of simply existing in this world, the zone will be right there to greet you. Question is though, is this fun? The lesser zone is massive and feels never-ending on a first playthrough, but as soon as you stumble over that cordoning river, the scope of the zone is hard to fully comprehend, and you'll keep walking. For a game that loves the tense firefights it ambushes you with and the intricate details of a Soviet-era arsenal blended with the flavor of post-USSR tech, the lovingly crafted animations for magazine swaps, reloads, and the clearing of malfunctions, is this not a weird choice to make the world this big, this never-ending, and then force you to walk it? Maybe. But maybe that's the point. It might not be immediately accessible, especially for those wanting a faster-paced shooter. It might not be instantly fun, but designing a game loop like this undoubtedly offers something else, as something that is crucial for the zone to be as impactful as it is. The sheer size of it.
People always snuck in. You always read stories about the daredevils who couldn't resist the pull of the exclusion zone. But maybe that's logical. Maybe you don't carve out a massive piece of once unassuming land and then impose harsh penalties on those found trespassing without writing at least a couple unofficial invitations. Maybe that's just human nature.
And that's when I realized it. 3, 5, 10, 20, 30, 50, 80 hours in, I had no interest in that reactor anymore. The monster at the end lay there in the middle, slumbering, undoubtedly a story for the ages, but ultimately one I had read a decade earlier. What I hadn't read were all the others, and this zone had thousands of them. Every building you come across represents someone. That's the nature of creating something like this. The zone in S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2 isn't a one-for-one recreation of the actual exclusion zone, nor is it an actual retelling of the events that led up to or happened after the 1986 accident, but it still reverberates the echo of those who spent their lives here. Every house in every village, every building completely abandoned, every classroom in every school, every parked truck deemed too contaminated, every toy left on every wood floor, every train carriage stopped for the last time, every tree planted for shade, every monument to a superpower faded, and every book for the last time placed on that table as they had to leave. It's a zone that cares about the history that it exists within and aims to honor it, and everyone who ever set foot here and dared to make a stand, to live a life. But S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2 isn't just this, and that's what truly sets it apart. It isn't a full one-for-one time capsule of a Ukrainian local's life on this pained, scarred piece of earth, but an amalgamation of everyone's lives. For possibly the most enticing location on our earth, a place painted with such intricate details, slightly different in every person's mind, every conspiracy, every rumor, every have you heard, and every bold-faced lie about the zone lives on here too. In the bandits holed up in abandoned factories, in the anomalies ambushing unsuspecting passersby, in the mutants trying to adapt to this new world, in the experiments still going on deep underground, and in the stalkers entering and never wanting to leave. It's a time capsule of the entire world's worst nightmares, of the world's most enticing place. And the fact that it manages to take in, care for, honor, and love the reality while simultaneously crafting an otherworldly tale to remember the curiosities of millions across the globe, that feels like an answer. There are those that will remember us. As all of this crumbles, we will.
It might have started there, in Chernobyl. Who knows? Really, for all intents and purposes, that was an end to our world. Not on a global scale, of course, that still came a few years later, but in that little subsection of our planet, that was it. Cordoned off and deemed inhospitable for hundreds of thousands of years. Or, well, maybe that's the rumors again. In his book, The World Without Us, author Alan Weisman talks about the birds that had called those Ukrainian woods their home for centuries, and how they, on April 26, 1986, were unconditionally silenced. As horror movie-esque as you could possibly get, an omen of what was to come. But the following spring, well, they were back. The world had survived yet another attempt on its life. An end painted up or the immense destruction of the power plant, the sheer chaos of mass panic evacuation, the growing anti-nuclear movements across the globe, and the slow demise of the people who'd stayed too close. But it's an end remembered through its stillness, through its details, through its intricate, the stories of the people who took one last look before storming out, never to return. Preserved in the memories of the people who lived it, the ones who witnessed the very day, but also through the ones who kept wondering, kept daring to ask, the people who snuck in, the people who wrote, who thought and pondered, the people who researched, worked, sheltered, and dreamt in the zone. We will, through ourselves, remember the time when we almost ended it. A great detective chase, up and down staircases completely falling apart, in and out of meadows so overgrown you can't see through them, through rows and rows of vehicles deemed too far gone. Face to face with the stories long lost, you come to peace with it. You almost make friends with it. The end of the world. The last flutter of everything we've ever known. It's impossible not to look for a way out. It's impossible not to glance away from the chaos going on all around us, up, out, at our eternal neighbors. Always there, always watching. Their gaze always trained. It's impossible not to think of the places among them, the things we could have done, the worlds we could have seen. It's impossible not to wonder. Were they disappointed?